Hi, and welcome to the Other World podcast. As you know, this new series that we're doing, we're talking more about our time on land, specifically with Fee and I at the Outback. But we have a very special guest today, Jane Elworthy, who's right now on a beautiful piece of land at Broken Hill. And we wanted to just talk a bit more about with you, Jane, about your story on land and the ley lines and just the different things that you bring. I'll just read out your bio. Oh, hi, just hi, Fee.
Hello, everyone.
I know you're as excited as me.
I'll just read out your bio. So whoever, if there's anyone who doesn't know you, I mean, I'm sure that most people do, but in case they don't, and they may not know everything that you bring. So I'll just read that out for everyone. Jane is an international sound healer, shamanic practitioner, master frame drummer, and channeler of the Hathor and Pleiadian energies. It's Jane's mission to help humans remember their true divine nature through the healing power of rhythm, sound, and sacred story. After a deeply traumatic childhood and later on a profound awakening experience, Jane was called back to the ancient woman's instrument, the frame drum, and has been a master drum maker and rhythm consciousness teacher for over 30 years. Through her work with sound and what many say is a remarkable voice, and yes, a remarkable voice, she brings through languages of light from the divine realms and inspires and enlivens many through her work with the rhythm body and the sacred voice. In Australia, Jane leads Outback retreats to connect with the dragon energies, and in southern France, she co-facilitates Awakening the Divine Heart, a powerful woman's retreat to reconnect with the sacred energies of Magdalene. Jane is based in Sydney and Broken Hill in Australia and works deeply with the land to activate the light codes along specific ley lines. So welcome, Jane.
Thank you. Thank you to both of you. Lovely to be here. Lovely to be back with you.
Welcome, Jane.
Thank you.
I mean, that bio's enormous, but there's so much more that we could say about you and your work. And we're just very grateful for you being here today and sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you.
I mean, I know Denny and I have a number of questions. They're probably all the same, but I'd love to start with, what was your first memory of being called out to land, and what was that experience like for you?
Well, my very first memory of being called out to land was when I was very young, and I was born in Sydney, but then when I was 2, we moved to Brisbane, and my parents had a business. This is before they went totally bankrupt and lost everything, but I had an Aboriginal nanny. And she would take us places. Mum and Dad were working at the business and she lived with us, and she was like our mother, really. And I remember her putting me up in a tree and telling me stories while I was sitting up in a tree. That's one of my first memories. I was probably about 4 years old. Mm-hmm. So that's really the first calling to me. And what can I say? The land kind of just seeps into you over your life if you're open to it. I certainly went through a stage where I wasn't interested in the land at all, and got into a very small bandwidth in my 20s, and then things started to soften and open again for me, and I moved to the Blue Mountains, and had some very profound experiences there. It's hard to know which way to go here because, you know what it's like with stories, they all kind of intertwine.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll tell the story of coming out here to Broken Hill, which is significant to that. And a little later on, we'd bought a house in Newcastle, and then I'd been out in the early 90s, out to Broken Hill on a storytelling tour. We used to have a show that we took around regional Australia. And we came through Broken Hill in the early 90s. And I remember I was just absolutely struck by the flowering gums, the yellow and the red flowering gum trees were really what it was for me too. And I remember going into a cafe and they were advertising yoga classes and a meditation class. And I thought, God, this isn't your average outback town. But it just stayed in my mind. And I had a really good coffee and I thought there was something that just stuck in my mind about Broken Hill. And then in 2003, I think it was, I said to my partner, let's buy a little investment house in Broken Hill, which we did. Didn't live there full time, came and went, renovated occasionally. And then when we separated, I ended up getting the Broken Hill house in the settlement. And so I came out to Broken Hill with a trailer load of furniture, an absolutely broken heart, no idea what I was going to do. Everything had fallen away and it was quite a dark night of the soul. And I was driving out somewhere between Cobar and Wilcannia and really in a destitute place. And all of a sudden I got a download. At that stage, sometimes I'd get a channeled message, but it wasn't real often. But this was an absolute download that showed me a map actually of Australia. And on that, it showed me a line in my mind's eye that stretched across New South Wales. It wasn't really that specific, but I looked it up later. But now that I know, it goes from just south of Coffs Harbour, through Dorrigo, out through the Warrumbungles, out through Broken Hill, and to the Flinders Ranges. That was the line it showed me. And the words that came with it was, you are to work with activating the light codes along this line. And when you get out to Magdalen House, you're to call it, when you get out to your house, you're to call it Magdalen House. And I went, okay, because what? I knew about the Magdalen, but really it was quite new to me. In a way, in that, but so I did that. I got out to I arrived at Broken Hill. I got out of the car, and there on the footpath outside my house, this is absolutely the absolute truth. Some kids had obviously been playing, and there was a pink 5-pointed star drawn in chalk on the footpath outside my house. At that stage, I didn't know that the 5-pointed star, I didn't know the significance of that as the trajectory of Venus, and that it's a symbol of the Magdalene. And it was drawn in pink, but I knew it was something. I just intuitively knew this means something. So I called my house Magdalen House and proceeded to work with, I just started on my house, activating the land, not knowing that there was a mine underneath the house, an old mine. And it was unbelievably difficult. And it was an immense journey of trying to offer something to the land. And actually, the truth was the land in the house area just kept saying no. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, you've given me this spiritual mission and then you've just made it unbelievably difficult. Every time I would dig, like I dug that whole property with a crowbar because of what had been dumped there, all the kind of tailings and stuff that had been dumped there. And I misinterpreted the mission. It was a really important part of my journey because I thought it was to work very physically with the land. And there is that. I thought it was like, make an incredible garden that will be a portal of energy for the light to come in. And that's absolutely part of the mission. But one day I got it. I was digging in the soil and swearing and just weeping, and nothing ever worked. Everything died. Where I really got it, what if you were not to have an expectation, but just to be in service? How would that change things? To take the ego out of it. And then I realized that I had an egoic agenda. I was going to save the land. God had come down and given me a mission. And, you know, I had to actually let all of that go. And when I was able to just go, okay, this is difficult, I was able to say to the land, you know, why did you ask me to call this place Magdalene House and then just make it so bloody difficult every day? And the message that was conveyed to me was, like Magdalene, like Yeshua and Magdalene, you work with the energies, you work with activating what's necessary without seeing any result. They knew that what they did wouldn't be seen for 2,000 years. Really, you know, it was the 12-12-12 portal that opened and activated something on the planet for the Christed energies to really be able to be embodied in, you know, by the masses, at least in our human form. And then I got it. It was like, we've got to take the agenda out of this. And then when that was gone, and I must say, I was in Broken Hill for 15 years. So this didn't happen, you know, in a couple of months. I was then able to go, it's my presence. It's about us being a beacon of light, you know, a lighthouse. And lighthouses always shine in hard, rocky places. They're not needed in nice places. Lighthouses are needed in the dangerous places, you know, to shine a light out. And you shine your light out without knowing who it's reaching. You just, that's all you do. And then I got it. That's what we're here for. And then I understood the message of activating the light codes. Yes, there are certain practices that you can do, but really it's about our presence. You know, we are, you know, I always like to say we are sacred sites. And when we're a sacred site, visiting a sacred site, that's when the power comes in. So after that, I was able to invite my beloved partner Jackie in, and we began the soul song journeys of bringing groups of women out to Broken Hill and Mutawinji, which is a sacred site about 130 k's northeast of Broken Hill, and it's directly connected to the Flinders energies, which we might get to. But that's I'll stop there just for a sec for that part of the story, in case you've got a question. Or...
I've got so many questions, but I was leaving space for you, Denny.
You go for it, Fee.
Well, my question really is, what then drew you to bringing other women out there? What was that call like that you felt to bringing women out to land and to, you know, share that gift with them?
I think once I got that, even though I had a message from Spirit, that I misinterpreted it. My ego grabbed it, and it went into, it's my job to save something. And when I was able to work with that over the years and release that, then I felt I was just called to bring other women out. I just knew then that it's about presence, and that when we work with, when we're fully present on the land hears it. And of course, you know, when you're in a group, it's much more powerful than what you can do just on your own. And so I worked out the logistics. It was, I went, and there's one of the elders out here in the Barkindji, the main elder out here at the Barkindji, Aboriginal people of this country. His name's Badger Bates. I tracked him down, and other Aboriginal elders, and you know, went through all this palaver, all the protocols. I know you know a little bit about that. And, you know, came to him and was like, please, would you give me, you know, told the story, and, you know, will you give me permission to work on this land and bring groups out to this land? And he was like, yeah, no worries, love. You know, I'd gone through this whole palaver. And I love that, and I love simplicity. And so I found that bringing the groups out, it's a two-way offering. You know, the the Pitjantjatjara people have an expression, napachi, napachi. It means I give you something, you give me something. And it's not a physical object, although it can be, but it's the law of reciprocity. So it's you offer something to the land by your presence or by your ceremony or your ritual, and the land gives back to you. And then, of course, that's a cycle. That's the rhythmic cycle that just keeps things moving. And that's what singing, that's what singing the land is. And sorry, Denny.
Oh, I was just going to say, when I heard you talk about the law of reciprocity, it just really hit home for me, because it was something that when we were in together, Fee and I, when we were with a group of women in Uluru, on the land there, and working with the Ananu, and being in the cultural centre where they a lot of the artists are, and we had this beautiful moment with a group of women that we brought out and the artists, and this exchange that happened in this art room, and it struck me at the time, because if you sort of remember 2020, there was the time of the bridge, or the Rainbow Bridge, and Uluru itself opening that bridge between heaven, earth. And in that room, I got this absolute sense of that. But the bridge being, and I think I don't know if I've said this to you before, Fee, but maybe, but a bridge, the actual arc of a bridge holds itself. So when you bring the 2 points together, the bridge is so perfectly aligned that it becomes a force that holds itself up. So if you look at the Sydney Harbour Bridge and it's got the columns do nothing. It's actually the arc of the bridge being completely met that holds it. And what happened in that room at that time was exactly that. There was this exchange, but it was completely matched in both directions. So I literally felt that happen in that room. And so when I heard you speak about that and the word for it, it was just like light bulbs. As you know, when those things happen, it's just like, it's such a recognition of exactly what happened.
Wow. That's so, so beautiful. I just love that. I love that analogy. What a wonderful way to put it. And it does also point out that thing that the Spirit was saying to me, you don't have to work so hard. Like, the work is already there. The land is already there doing it. We don't have to force it through the ego. Like, we're the pillars, but the energy, is happening itself through presence and an open heart and love.
There is a story around the ley lines that I think I've heard you speak of before, but I can't remember. But I know it's around that map, so I know that line came to you in your imagination before it actually physically you found out about it. Is there a story around that map?
How I got the map?
Yeah.
So I was doing. I have a dear friend, Rosemary, who lives on 1,000 acres of high altitude forest up near Dorrigo. And I went to her and was doing quite a bit of shamanic work, and was on her land, and I was just telling her this story of I've been shown this this map. There's a line, there's lines all over the place, but there's one specific line. And I don't know what to do with the information. Like, I'll do it. Okay, God, I'll do what you ask, but I didn't know what really to do about it. And she was like, oh, okay, come with me. And she took me to a friend's place and said, tell this woman your story. And I did. So she said, this is for you. Obviously, I've been saving it. And out she brought a map of Australia with all the ley lines drawn on it, and there was the line that went from Urunga, just under Coffs Harbour, and some of you know it's a powerful place, and it's where the river meets the sea, and across through Bellingen and Dorrigo, like I said, out to the Warrumbungles, which is a vortex point. I can bring that map up if you like. or maybe
You've gifted both Fee and I a
I
copy of
have
that
gifted
too,
it
which
to
is
you.
just amazing. But yes, if you have it, it would be kind of interesting to show
Yeah,
what we're talking about.
I'd have to find it, but I should have done it before. I'm sorry. And then out to Broken Hill, and then out to the Flinders. And I didn't know what to do with the information at that stage. When I got the map, I thought, oh, okay, well, it's a physical trek. They want me to actually take a group, and at one point I was thinking of camels or whatever. And then I was like, well, no, that's ridiculous. So then what I did was I ran, I held groups at different points along that line. So I ran something in Bellinger. I went to Urunga, to the source of it. I mean, it goes around the world. It's not the source of it, but where that line comes in onto the land. And I did ceremony there and got some visions there. Ran groups in Bellingen, Dorrigo, and then at the Warrumbungles. And then I was ready. I was already in Broken Hill at that time, but then I was ready. It's all around bringing groups together at these places. And it's around singing the land. And I sort of saw too that the line, at one point, these ley lines there are 3 main grids that go around the earth. I could talk about that, or I'll just, yeah.
Yes, please.
So there's the crystalline, and they're not separate. They're all we talk about them as separate, but they're all intertwined. It's quantum, so of course it's in the quantum realm, so you can't separate them, but to try and kind of separate them to explain. There's the crystalline grid, there's the electromagnetic grid, and there's the Gaia gravity grid. Now, so we know, and none of them are visible. So we know gravity. It's connected to gravity is connected to time, and some of us have had that sense of time shifting, getting faster. And what's happening is the gravity grid is actually lessening. So it doesn't mean that we're all going to float off or anything. It's not. I'm giving a very simplistic explanation here. But as the gravity grid shifts and loses some of its density, time is having the illusion. Time itself is an illusion, but of speeding up. So that's just a little, and that's connected, of course, to the molten core at the center of the earth, which is beginning to spin faster. The electromagnetic grid is, the leyline system is part of the electromagnetic grid that interpenetrates and surrounds the earth. So the leyline system is part of that. And at one point, the ancients used to be able to time travel, and some maybe still do, through, bilocation happens through that system. And over time, it's like some of those lines that were intact and were strong, and the current, if you think of it like an electricity current, were very active, have become weaker over the millennia. And a lot of it is because of, what happened to the Indigenous people. And so when the Aboriginal people say, they're singing the land, you think that they kept those lines alive and intact for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years. They kept the charge in the land through their presence, through their ceremonies, through singing the land. And then in a space of 200 years, they're not allowed to do that anymore in many, many places. And so a lot of these lines are no longer intact. They're kind of, instead of like a straight line, and they're not straight either, they move, but again, just as an explanation, it's sort of like a dotted line in places. And so what I understood my mission to be was to bring to help me, only one person, but with these groups, to join the dots in a way, because our presence brings a charge, and through the heart. And hopefully that's happened. And I feel on the Tracing the Dragon group that we went on, at Akarula in the Flinders Ranges, many of us were talking about how we actually felt, that activation come back online in a way. And so we're all doing it in different ways. And of course, just good old kindness and love contributes to that. But that's wonderful to hear your story, Denny, about those Aboriginal women and being able to, to offer something. And, people have to remember in this country, when I said I had an Aboriginal nanny when I was a kid, she was under the Flora and Fauna Act. Aboriginal people were not considered, they weren't on the census, they weren't considered as citizens, and they came under the Flora and Fauna Act. She was actually taken from us. That's another long story that I won't go into. And, that's just one little thing of what they've gone through in multitudes. So we do need the white people as well. And many, many Aboriginal people, and some that I've spoken to at length, understand that. They really needed to be protective and they really needed to be secretive for obvious reasons. But there was a movement that happened, and big dialogues. It was to do with the Pleiadians. It was to do with an amazing woman called Anne Saunders, who I was lucky to travel with, where there was a willingness started and an understanding that, we needed to start to work together more. So look, that's just a little about the electromagnetic grid, the leyline system. And we're also working with that, of course, in France, where it's very active because it never stopped being sung there. Through pilgrimage, through walking those lines, the Camino, and the understanding that this is sacred. But here in this land, the trauma of the white people that came, it's not a blame. But a lot of that was lost, and you're doing it. You two are both doing it with what you're doing. And the crystalline grid is sort of went offline. It's now back online. Uluru is deeply more it's on a ley line, but it's more connected with the crystalline grid. So I'll give the brief version because I love this topic. I can just go on.
So do I. It's fascinating.
In 1987, there was an event called the Harmonic Convergence. I'm sure you're aware of it, or many of you, the viewers, will be aware of it. And it was a particular alignment, galactic alignment, planetary alignment that happens very rarely. And groups across the world gathered all over the world. It was an incredible moment. I remember being with a large group, and we were up on the cliffs at Bondi, up in North Bondi, and we did an incredible meditation. And it's sort of like, I'll do this literally, even though again it's not, it was like a reading was taken of human consciousness. And there was something in the collective, enough light quotient, that said yes, that the crystalline grid was kind of rebooted. It's not that it went away, it's just that it had been downgraded. And so from that moment, the crystalline grid started to come back online, because we said yes, humanity would have had a really different outcome. There would have been a different outcome had we not. I mean, what Nostradamus saw, that was a very real potential. It's just that it didn't come to pass. And a lot of these catastrophic things that channelers see, they're seeing, and I know you know all this as channelers, but they're seeing a potential. And what was also in the mix was the potential of humanity ascending and waking up. Gaia, it was a moment when Gaia began to ascend, and now humanity also could ascend. So what else was I going to say about the crystalline grid? Well, you know, crystals contain information. And so as the crystalline grid came back online, so too came a whole plethora of new information that humans could now access. A lot of our pineal glands, which are crystalline structures, began to open. And we're still in the really early stages, you know, of this, but we are, in general, moving from a carbon-based body into a crystalline. We're already electromagnetic, crystalline body, and it's going to take time. But you know, I think what happened at Uluru, you know, a couple of years ago, was another huge activation of the crystalline energies, you know, coming online there and going out across, you know, it's also connected. So when something opens somewhere, it opens everywhere. So we don't have to go anywhere really, but it is useful to go to these sacred places because they are vortexes and portals. And the last thing, well, not the last thing, but one other thing that I just want to say is around vortexes and portals. Am I going too fast?
No.
Okay. So with electricity, I mean, even if you ask an electrician, you know, if you've got an electrical current going that way and you've got another electrical current going that way, they don't cross. What happens is they form a vortex. And so because the grid systems, particularly the electromagnetic I'm talking about at this moment, goes that way and goes that way around the Earth like a grid, there are places where the lines sort of appear to cross. And so what happens is a vortex is formed there. Now these vortexes can be either, very benevolent, or they can also be places where it's not so benevolent. And the land holds memory. The land holds memory. And I'm jumping now, but the crystalline grid is actually where the memory has been held. And so as the crystalline grid has now, from 2012, fully back online, what you'll start noticing is that, say you were at a place where there had been a battle, like Gallipoli, or some of the slaughters that have happened on this land, you know, and you go, oh, this feels really horrible to be on this land. I can feel it, and I know those places. What you'll find is that those memories are going to over time be lifted out. And so it's very, very, very exciting, you know. And so, you know, we've got an opportunity now, whereas before the land was going, no, wounding, you know, stop. We have access more to the benevolent, loving energies, powerful energies within certain places. So that's really exciting. And of course, we're not separate from the earth. So that's happening in our own body. A lot of trauma, you know, with the work, how much trauma is leaving people? That's to do partly with the crystalline grid coming back into the crystalline structure of our own being and allowing us to release some of the trauma in our land, which is our body, our sacred side. Yeah, very, very exciting.
My goodness, you're talking my language there.
Isn't it? It's so exciting.
Oh,
yeah.
It is. And just that, I mean, one thing that I hadn't really connected was the Harmonic Convergence in 2012 to...
Well, 1989 was the Harmonic.
1989. Okay, so the other one you mentioned in 2012.
Yes. So what happened there was you know, nothing happens like immediately. So there were various trigger points, Lions Gates, and some of the repetitious numbers like the 888, the 999, some of those. Yeah. So what happened in 1989, it was like collectively, although unconsciously, humanity went yes. We said yes to something. And so then the crystalline grid, the human component of that because it's doing its own thing all over the place, came back online, and then it came on in different phases. Like there were reboots over time, and then at the 12 was when it was fully online. And that's the time that the gateway into the new earth, the new world. Yes. So.
And I think the way a lot of people would see 2012 would be an awakening to in consciousness levels. I mean, I certainly know a lot of people that started a much more conscious way of living, and it links a lot to 2012.
Yes,
Wanting
absolutely.
to know more, having more questions, and that is probably how a lot of people would feel that from a human perspective.
You just went.
Oh, I think we may have had a freezing, but we'll just wait, because I know that the sometimes out at Broken Hill the signal can get a little bit wonky. But gosh, it's fascinating, isn't it, V?
Oh, I know. And I was just linking that 2012 into 2021, and when that big activation took place, and how that shifted things in such a big way.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Fee. I did miss a bit there. I went, my internet connection knocked out for a sec there. I'm back now. Would you mind repeating that?
Oh, we were just filling time until you came back, really.
Okay. Yeah.
I think what you've got to say is probably much more interesting.
No, not at all. Please, I'd love.
What I'd love to know is that 1987, 2012, and then 2021. Are those three events linked? Oh, maybe this isn't something we're not meant to be talking about. Doesn't that happen sometimes? You just went a little bit then. Did you hear that question, Jane?
No, I didn't. Sorry.
I would love to know from your perspective those three major events of 87, 2012, and 89, 2012, and 2021. How they may be linked, or are they linked?
I think it's all linked. The actual linking, well, I do know that, like I said, the harmonic convergence was when there was like a reading, in a way, and there was enough of a light quotient and enough of a yes from humanity that the process was able to kick in to sort of reboot the crystalline grid fully online. And that was in 2012. And then the 2021, you mean the Uluru? Well, it seemed to me like there was some code within Uluru that was unlocked. And of course, on a very literal way, it was the stopping of the climbing, wasn't it? So, there was maybe just the Aboriginal people, the land hasn't been so walked over, so trampled on. And but in terms of what actually happened at Uluru, I don't know. You probably got more information on that than me. I just felt it was hugely significant, but what I did feel very strongly was that it was none of my business. I had that feeling very strong, for me personally. And I know that people went there at that big opening, and the Aboriginal people were saying, like, please don't come.
Yeah.
And people went there in their masses anyway. And I thought, oh, guys, come on, like, just let them do their work, what it is. So that was a bit disappointing. And I know it didn't go so well for some of the white groups that meant very well and meant to help. But we sort of got to get out of the way in a way. And it reminded me of me when I was first given that mission, to work with activating the light codes. And I was like, da-da, da-da, I'm going to save the planet. And it was a similar thing. Like, what's required is just presence. Well, it doesn't have to be physical presence, but consciousness and intention and love. And that's readable, by who has to read it. Our light quotient expands. Whereas I was finding my vibration was going down and down because I was getting so depressed at not being able to carry out my light mission. It was sort of ironic in a way.
Yeah. I think I'm becoming aware that I think we need to call this episode part 1, because there's so many directions we could take this conversation. I think we've got a sort of 10-part series here.
Yes, I'd love to. It's a fascinating subject, and there's so much, so much to talk about. And I think the main thing is that I've learned and have got from Aboriginal people, and I've been around a lot of Aboriginal people, and there is a little story I could tell you if we have time or if you want to hear it. It's around keeping it simple, and I'll tell the story anyway, that'll explain it. So I mentioned a woman called Anne Saunders who works with the Pleiadians, which are the 7 sisters, and of course, particularly where you're working out there with the Anangu people, they're working directly with the 7 sisters. And I know that it's a Pleiadian base, Uluru, and maybe Arcturian, I feel, as well, is that she for many years was in negotiations with Aboriginal women what do you feel, like I was saying before, if the white women and Aboriginal women start working together a little more, would you be open to allowing them to witness some of your sacred work and the exchange like you had in the art plays? And so a small group of us, they eventually agreed. These are the women from Ernabella, which is in northern South Australia. Mm-hmm. And so what was organised, and this was the first one, she did a number of them, but this was the very first one, was that those women from Ernabella and women from many, many other places, the Anangu women came, they were from all over, mobs from everywhere, came to Ernabella to do their sacred dances and sacred songs, and a very small group of white women were invited to come, and I feel very blessed to have been one of those women. And so we all arrived, and it was, the Aboriginal women were over there. It was just on the land. We were just in swags, and the Aboriginal women sort of had their camp over there, and we were just all in swags, just lying on the land in our little department. And each day we would come together, and the thing was, don't ask questions. Don't go, excuse me now, could you interpret that dance for me? It's like, take it into your heart, take it into your body, don't ask anything. And we sat there, and it was like, these women are shamans. We just went, I was just in an altered state most of the time. We weren't allowed to lie down, we had to sit. There were protocols, and we had to, all these things. And over the day, and we were all in our little camp, having our instant miso soup and our buckwheat crackers, and, they're having their whatever they had, white kangaroo tail, white bread, and Coca-Cola.
Oh,
and so what happened was, over the days, more and more women came, and they found that they didn't have enough clapsticks. They have the wooden Aboriginal clapsticks. They were just using those mainly, and the dancers and their feet with the songs. And so what they started to do was they ran out of clapsticks, so they got plastic Coke bottles. And the women were using these plastic Coke bottles as clapsticks, empty ones. And we're all aghast, how can you use, that's not sacred, that's plastic, and we were just absolutely aghast at that. That won't work. And then, until I realised that it worked absolutely fine, and that there's a different interface. They have a different interface between the material realm and the spirit realm. And I really got that it's all the one thing to them, because we were like and having an education in, environmentalism and recycling and all this stuff, that plastic is bad, and wood is good, and wood's spiritual, but plastic's not spiritual. And they were just, they ran out of clapsticks, they needed to use something, and it made no difference to the sacredness of their work. It was a different interface between spirit and matter.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such an eye-opener for me, and it made me go, ah. And then I understood from Native American ceremonies I'd been to, where they'd do a deep ceremony in the kiva, and then they'd come out and, light a cigarette or something, and have a chat. And I couldn't ever understand that, because I was petitioning, this is sacred, this is not sacred. And they don't work that way. And it's difficult for us to get that. But it really helped me in my teaching to keep things simple and, don't have the edges of things so defined.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Absolutely. I think, and when you do spend time with any of the first people, you do get that sense of, well, it was something you were speaking to before, that the trauma that has happened on the land and what they've gone through as a people and what we've, white people have done, and that needing to see the contrast, not going out there with this idea of, number one, either saving or being saved, going out there with this knowledge or wanting to know, but wanting to see the contrasts of the place out there, because there's a lot of darkness and a lot of shit that's happened that needs to be we need to be aware of when we're out there, rather than just thinking, oh, there's this beautiful healing space and people that can give to me so much. There's something in that really needs to be acknowledged, that there is this other side that is very much the day-to-day side of how these people are living now, because of the changes that have happened in such a short time.
Yeah.
And the pain of the land that holds, like you say, all those memories of what's gone on. So having an awareness when going out to land of what has actually happened, I think, is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. So important. And it's wonderful to know that that some of those traumas now, with the Crystalline Grid being online, and that some of those traumas are being lifted. It's going to take time, and some of them have been locked in place. There's a lot of other forces that have, been present on Earth, that have locked things in place that don't necessarily have our best interests at heart either. And we have to be aware of all of that. Yeah, we've got to go in our full sovereignty to these places. Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
And we think we're helping when actually we have an underneath agenda of help me. I need help me, and I'll.
Well, one or the other, right? I want to help you, and I want you to help me, but there just kind of needs to be no agenda.
No
and
agenda.
That's when the magic happens.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. No agenda. I think that's the key. Yeah, it's okay to have a plan. Plan's different to an agenda, but yeah, and just be open, and very much. I find I try to do it all the time now. I think of myself as a sacred site, walking the land, and so and each person as a sacred site walking the land, so that these, and so the interactions you have all the time are with sacred sites. And there are times when that unifies in a bigger way, where you've got these, where the ley lines, for example, do converge, and we have not only a vortex but also a portal, which opens up, and it's the places where the very powerful, loving energies are much more available to us. Some of those places being the Warrumbungles, the Northern Flinders, and some other places all around the world, of course. But that's two of them in Australia, main ones that I'm working with. Yeah. you know, and the work you're doing, just extraordinary. And some of the comments that, you know, I've heard, just beautiful, beautiful work.
And I think one of the big learnings that I've taken from connecting with the Inannu people and working with them, not even working, you can't even call it working, but connecting with them, is that it's just so important. It's just all we need to come there with is our presence. Really, if we come with our presence and no expectation, the journey just simply unfolds in the most powerful way.
Yes.
And what I love about the times that we journey out there is that the women just simply feel the call. You know, they just feel that call. Something is calling them, yes, because they've opened up to the ability to be present with that. And yes, I think that's such a powerful part of the journey. I think that's something that you've taught me in the journeys that I've done with you.
Yes, yeah. And to allow ourselves not to know what the call is. You know, yeah, just to hear the call.
Yes.
Not to go, I hear you. What do you want? Like just I hear you.
Ask a question. Just don't ask a question. Just trust. Yeah.
But with that, Jane, you know, you got that download of that line and to work that line. And there are, you know, and the calling that women feel to go. There is this thing about the link between Uluru and Akarula that I feel really strongly needs to be traveled, like that bit from Uluru to Akarula. And it started at Akarula when Fee and I went out there with you, and that was like that side of it. And then to go to Uluru and have this feeling that there's something in that piece. And I've actually we've had another woman on the podcast who's talked about that as well, feeling that call to link places, to just travel the roads, to walk on land, to link energetically places. And I don't know why, you know, there's no reason, but it's just there.
It's there. Well, that's pilgrimage, isn't it? I mean, that's what pilgrimage is, and why we do actually walk. For me, it wasn't sort of physically, literally possible to do what I saw, just too many hills. But you've had that for a while, that call. I remember when we had lunch in Avalon, you know, you both spoke about that. And and I would say trust it. And I'd say trust it and just ask what the next step is and do it. And it might take a few trips and it probably won't always be easy. But if we don't expect easy, like we tend to think that if we get a message from Spirit that it's going to be easy. Like my experience is it's been bloody difficult.
well, kind of. And yet I think when it becomes easy is when you let go of any kind of expectations.
Exactly. That's when it became easy. Yeah. When I realized, I've got my ego involved in this, you know, and I've got an agenda.
Yeah.
So look, I think it sounds really amazing. Yeah. And they are linked. I mean, they are, and maybe you know, you guys have part of that key of what that is. And you came to the Flinders with Jackie and I, and maybe it was passed to you to then link it.
Yeah. It's overwhelming when you let your mind get into it.
Yeah, that mind. Yes, we've got to keep that little tricky monster away from it. Yeah. It's for the planning, you know, the mind is for airfares and car hire and accommodation and all that. But yeah.
But oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I was just going to say that it feels like that's a big journey, and it feels like we've been dancing around it for a while, and it feels like it's starting to come in more consciously now. So I think you're right. I think we needed to have a few journeys first to understand. And also for us, I think we were really building and developing a strong connection with the Inannu people.
Absolutely.
That is part of that journey in some way, even though we can't see it yet. So it feels divinely timed. Yes. But it's definitely coming in much more strongly at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does take time because, you know, like your soil had to be built, before you can plant this next seed. And it does. It takes trips over and over and over again.
Well, and like you were saying with Anne Saunders and opening that, working with the First People and that women's group that you attended. Wow, that sounds amazing that you were able to be there. It feels like there is that we need to, the work that we've been doing at Uluru in some ways is getting that kind of permission to work that particular line.
Absolutely. And it may or may not come through humans. It might just be permission directly from the land, which it sounds like it is. Not that they're separate, particularly when you're working with the First Nations people, but But I think, if the calling's there, really, really trust that. Wow, what an amazing journey that would be. I've got a new Cooper Petey's interesting.
Yeah.
Cooper Petey's very interesting.
I'm looking forward to going there. I've heard so much about it from different people.
I had a fantastic pizza in Cooper Petey. I always remember the pizza. And I went to an underground church service. A lot of it's underground.
Yeah.
It's an interesting little place.
And interesting characters.
Very, very, very interesting characters, which I love. I love marginal places. I grew up in a very kind of, later on after my mum and dad went bankrupt, I grew up in a very marginal place and by the docks and the industry. And so there's something for me. I have a real heart calling to quirky, strange places. Cooper Petey's definitely one of those. But what's in that sunlight captured into gems there, the opal, think of what the opal is. It's all the light spectrum, somehow captured through water and silica, to beam out from the land in these sacred gems. It's very powerful.
Oh,
there's so many different angles. Like this conversation is just the tip of the iceberg with you.
Yes.
I'm conscious of our time, but I think we'd love to invite you back, Jane, and
I'd love to
do part two.
Do part two of this conversation, because I feel like we've just scratched the surface so far.
I would love to, and maybe we could get into talking in terms of the land about the difference between density and dimensions, and some of that juicy stuff as well.
Oh, hell yes, let's do that.
Yeah, we'll book that in.
And also I'll be soon running another a short webinar called the Gaia Human Template, which is talking about going into a little more detail about some of the things we've talked about today, and earth energies and
beautiful. If you've got some information you can send us on that, then we can add that to this podcast for people to reach out to you if they want to learn more about that.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. It's like a 2-hour, it'll just be like a 2-hour initial class, but we'll cover a lot of ground with some slides and diagrams and things.
Beautiful.
Maps.
I'll be there.
Yay.
Is that next month, Jane?
Yeah, that's next month.
Beautiful.
That's in July. Yeah.
Beautiful.
I'll have a date probably by the end of today.
Oh, beautiful. Send that through to us and we'll put it on.
Thank you.
And our details. Beautiful. Well, let's do this again. I think we've definitely got so much to cover.
Yeah, wonderful. Oh, thank you so much. So beautiful to be with you both as always, and with your beautiful audience. Yeah, lovely.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you so welcome.
Much.